G'day everybody, welcome to another Affinity photo tutorial. This week I'm going to show you how I created this werewolf scene here. Got lots of tips and tricks for you in this tutorial. So as usual, let's get started. Starting off here with just a new template 16 by 9, and I created that just by going File, New, and picking this template here, 1920 by 1080, 16 by 9. So I'm going to start off with this one. So the first picture I'm going to bring over is the picture of the sky here. I'm going to use my in-painting brush tool just to get rid of a few of these distractions here, like these comets or shooting stars. I'm just going to get rid of those fairly quickly. And that looks pretty good. And I'm going to copy this one over, Command C, and just paste it on top of this template here and resize it, stretch it across. And I'm also going to flip it, arrange, and flip vertical. So I've got the lighter part on top and the darker part down the bottom. Okay, we're ready to bring over our next picture. I might just stretch this canvas out a little bit so we don't get those white lines. So let's bring over our next picture, which is going to be this sky here. And again, a few little distractions. I'm going to use my in-painting brush tool to get rid of this moon here because I'm going to use my own moon, and a few of these little distractions here just to get rid of those. Command C, and over here right on top of this one, Command V, double click, and we can resize that. Command 0, and again I'm going to flip that, so arrange, flip vertical, and I'm going to stretch that right over the top of this picture, and I'm going to add a mask down here on the masks. And now I'm going to use my gradient tool here, and I'm going to just drag up all the way to the top. Make sure you've got white here and black here, and then I'm just going to use this little bar here to just bring in those clouds into the picture. So that looks pretty good, and I'm happy with that. So I'm going to just name that one Sky 1. Okay, let's bring over the picture of our other sky, which is going to be this one here. Again, I don't want this picture of the moon because I'm going to use my own. So I make my brush a little bit bigger with my right and left bracket keys. I'm on my in-painting brush here. And again, I'm just going to paint over that moon and just get rid of it so we don't have it in our picture. And it's gone. So again, Command C, back over to the picture here. And again, right on top, Command V, double click, make sure we're on our move tool over here, and then resize this picture as well. Command 0 to get to a normal size, and then I'm going to drag that across all the way. And I'm going to change the blend mode to average. So that way I've got my stars and my clouds still showing through on the picture. Okay, the next picture we're going to bring over our foreground, which is going to be the picture of the rocks here. So let's just copy those. I've already made a selection, so let's just copy those rocks, Command C. Come over here to our picture. Right on top, Command V. Let's double click, resize. Just drag that all the way down and all the way across. Command 0. Make it a little bit smaller so we can see it. I'm just going to drag that out a tiny little bit more and then make a copy. Command J. Come up here to arrange and flip horizontal. And in this one I'm just going to drag out to about there. So we've got the whole coverage there. On these rocks now I'm going to highlight the second one. I'm holding my shift key down to highlight both of these. And I'm coming up here to layer and merge selected. I just want that to be one picture now, and let's call those rocks. On our rocks now, we're going to blend them into the picture a little bit better. So we're going to, right on top, add a new pixel layer. And with our color picker here, we're going to pick one of these sort of bluey colors in our picture and activate that color. So on that pixel layer, we'll come over here to our flood fill selection tool and flood that with that color. Let's grab that pixel layer, which is our color, and let's clip it to our rocks. And you can see our rocks have taken on that color now. On our blend mode, we'll change it to multiply. So now our rocks are blending in a little bit better. Grabbing our move tool, just going to move them down a little bit to about there. Looks pretty good. also going to add an exposure while I'm here. So an exposure layer. Let's clip that to the rocks as well, and let's just darken those down a bit. We can always come back later and tweak it a little bit more. So we've got our rocks in place. So the next one we're going to do is add our forest. So on our forest layer here, we're going to use our flood fill selection tool again. I'm going to have my tolerance set at 50. Right down here in the greenest part down here, just going to click once, and then I'm going to invert that layer and hit delete. Let's get rid of the marching ants, and we've got a fairly good picture of our trees here. So I'm going to copy those over, Command C, over to our picture, and I want these to be behind the rocks. So I'm going to click on that picture here of our sky. Actually going to name that sky 2 while I'm here, and I'm going to paste that forest in so it's behind the rocks there. Let's move it up a little bit. Let's stretch it out a little bit as well. I'm going to make a copy of that as well with Command J, and then I'm going to go Arrange and Flip Horizontal. So we've got sort of our forest all the way across. Again, I'm going to hold my Shift key down and select both of the forest layers and come up here to a layer and merge selected. Let's call that forest and hit enter. Going to do the same thing with the forest with that pixel layer. So add a new pixel layer. Still got that blue. Using my flood fill tool, I'm going to flood that and then clip that to the forest. Change the blend mode to multiply. Also, again, going to add an exposure layer, and again we can come back and tweak all of these layers because they're in our layer stack here. So let's just darken that forest down a little bit as well, and that looks pretty good. In between the forest and the rocks, I'm going to add another pixel layer. I'm going to come up here to my brushes. I'm going to pick, I've got these cloud and mist brushes, so I'm going to pick a cloud, and you can get those brushes from Brushies. They're absolutely free to download. So I'm going to use my color picker here and just pick a lighter color in the picture. One looks pretty good. I'm going to highlight that color, and on that pixel layer, grabbing my brush, and with my brush fairly big, make sure that color is highlighted. I'm just going to sweep across the back of those rocks there with that color. Add down here a live Gaussian blur and take that all the way up to 100 pixels. I'm just giving that a little bit of sense of depth with between the rocks and the trees there. So let's just call that mist. Hit enter. So I've got our mist in place, and you can always drop the opacity a little bit if you want to, maybe to about 75%. We can come back and tweak that later. It just adds that little bit of depth to the picture. Okay, let's change our brush back to the basics. Okay, we're going to add now our moon. So we've got our picture of our moon here. What we're going to do here is use our flood fill selection again. Tolerance is 20, and just click anywhere on the black, and then come up here and invert the selection so it's just of the moon. On refine, I am going to feather that moon about 1 pixel and hit apply. And then I'm going to copy it with my Command C, coming over to my picture. Now I want my moon behind my forest. So I'm going to click just here on this Sky 2 layer and Command V, come up here to my Move tool and bring my moon into place here. Let's make it a little bit smaller, maybe rotate it a little bit, and right in the middle I want a fairly big moon there. So on the moon as well, I'm going to add a live Gaussian blur and just give it a small amount of blur, just till you see it sort of maybe about 2 pixels. That looks pretty good at the moment. Okay, so we're starting to get all our elements in place. So we've got our moon. Let's bring over our first building, and this is going to be our building here. And again, I've already made the selection, taken out the bits that I don't want. So I'm going to copy that building, Command C, back over to this picture, and I want my buildings in front of my moon but behind my forest. Let's name that moon while we're here. So I'm clicking on that moon layer and then pasting my building in here. And I can make that building a little bit smaller. I'm also going to flip the building. So arrange, flip horizontal, move it into place over here. And about there, I might just stretch that down a little bit. And that looks pretty good about there. So we're going to do the same thing to this building as we did with the rocks to help it blend in a little bit. So we're going to click on the building, add a new pixel layer, grab our color picker and pick a sort of bluey color in the background and activate that color. On that pixel layer, we're going to use our flood selection tool and flood it. And then we're going to clip it to our building. Again, we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. So now we've got our building looking pretty good in the background. We're also going to add an exposure while we're here and clip that to our building as well. And we can make that a little bit darker. And we'll come back and play with that exposure a little bit later. Now, while we're here on this building, I'm going to add a little bit of rim light to it. And the way I'm going to do that is clicking on that. Let's call that building left. And I'm going to come up here to select and selection from layer. So I've just got the building selected and I'm going to come up here to select and pick grow and shrink. And on this one, I'm going to go -1. So I'm going to shrink that selection by 1 pixel and click apply. I'm also going to come up to select and go to feather. So I'm feathering the selection now. I'm going to hit 5 and hit apply. So I've just feathered that. I'm going to invert the selection now. So I'm going to invert it. On top of the building, I'm going to add another pixel layer. Grabbing my color picker, I'm going to pick a color of the moon here that it's shining onto the building. And again, flood fill selection and flood that. Whoops. Make sure that color is activated that we just picked for the moon. Grabbing our flood fill selection tool and flood fill that color. Clip it to our building and then we can go Command D to get rid of the marching ants and you can see it's put like a line all the way around that building. So I'm going to add on that color, the pixel color, a mask. And on the mask, I'm going to pick my brush tool. Make sure I've got a soft brush. About 25% for the flow. Change our colors back to default. And I'm just going to be in black and I'm just going to soften that a little bit. So I'm just going to soften that color back to white if you think you've done a little bit too much. So it just gives us that nice little bit of a rim light around the building. That looks pretty good. So I'm just going to click on the whole building now with my move tool. I'm just going to move it back a little bit. That looks pretty good. So on our exposure, let's click on our exposure layer and let's just lighten that up a little bit. So about there. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so that's our building left. So we're going to add another building on the right here. So let's click on building left. Come over here to our next building. Command C. Back over here, right on top again, Command V. Let's resize this building. So on this building again, we're going to come up to Arrange and flip it horizontal. And let's just put that about there. Looks pretty good. Going to do exactly the same thing. So we're going to add a new pixel layer, picking a nice bluey color in the sky and activating it. We're going to use our flood fill tool to flood that color and clip it to our building. And then change the blend mode to multiply. So now we've got that building blending in a little bit better as well. Again, we're also going to add an exposure and clip that to the building. You can either make it darker or lighter. So again, we're going to add that little bit of rim light from the moon. So we've got our buildings. So let's call this one building right. And let's come up here to select and selection from layer. Come up here to select, grow and shrink, again -1 pixel, and then select feather And let's take that to 5 and hit enter and apply. So don't forget we need to invert, add another pixel layer on top. Use our color picker to pick a nice bright color in the moon. Make sure it's activated. Use our flood fill selection tool and flood fill that color, and then clip it to our building. So we've got that clip. Let's get rid of the marching ants, and you can see it's given us our nice rim light around the building. So again, we'll add a mask just to this rim light. Change our colors to default, and we want black. Grabbing our brush tool over here, 25%. We know that we've still got a nice soft brush. And let's just soften that rim light up a little bit. And that's not looking too bad. So on our exposure, we might just brighten that up a tiny little bit. Okay, on our other building, we might do the same on our exposure. On our left building, just brighten that up a tiny little bit. That is looking pretty good. Okay, so we've got everything in place here. So what I'm going to do now is everything behind the trees, I'm going to add a depth of field. So just on top of this building here, I'm going to come down here to my live filters and click on depth of field. Let's have a look. This one here, it's going to clip it to that building, but I don't want that. So I'm just going to click on the depth of field, just drag that out and on top of that building all by itself. And I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit. And I'm just going to bring up that radius tiny little bit till I see that background just blurring a little bit. I reckon I'll bring it down to about 8 pixels. So we've got that building and the moon just a little bit blurred. This building here, I can see a little bit of white here, so that is the right building. So just on my move tool here, just going to move that across a little bit. So pretty happy with that. So we've got our scene set. So we've got our rocks, our mist, our trees, our buildings, and our moon. So we're ready to bring over now our werewolves. So let's go ahead and do that. Bring over our first one here, and this is going to be the middle werewolf. So while I've got this werewolf here, I'm going to make his head a little bit bigger. So I'm going to come up here to liquefy, and this one here, liquefy pinch tool. Just clicking on that with a fairly big brush, just going to make his head a little bit bigger, just to stand out a little bit more. He's the alpha of all the werewolves. So I'm just going to hit apply on that. Command C to copy him over and into my picture here. And they're going to be right on top. So I'm going to click the pixel layer here and click Command V. Double click and make him a lot smaller. Command 0. Now I did get all these werewolves that I'm going to use from NeoStock, and I did have to pay for them. They're $4 US each, and I bought 3 of the werewolves from their werewolf pack. So if you do want to use these werewolves, unfortunately, yes, you do have to pay for them. I'm sorry about that, but you may be able to find an alternative on the net that you can use, or on NeoStock you can download a low-res version of these werewolves that you can use to practice with. Unfortunately, you can't use them to post on the web or post your pictures on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that if you use the low version. So let's position our first werewolf here, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to position all the werewolves just so I can see what they look like. So he's leaping over the rocks here, so right in the middle, that looks pretty good. Let's grab our second werewolf here, which is this one, Command C. Back over here, right on top again above the pixel layer, Command V. Double click and let's make him smaller so we can position him. I'm going to come up here to arrange and flip horizontal, and I'm going to move this werewolf on this side over here. Make him a bit bigger right down the bottom here. About there, looks pretty good. Bring over our last werewolf, which is this one, Command C. Again, right on top of this pixel layer, Command V. Double click, and let's make him the right size as well. Place him. I'm going to turn him horizontal as well. flip horizontal. And these wolves aren't as big as this one because he's the alpha, so I'm going to make him a little bit smaller. About there, looks pretty good. You can position them wherever you like. So what I'm going to do to blend all these werewolves in, firstly, let's come underneath and add a pixel layer. And let's just use black with our brush, about 40%. Let's just paint a bit of shadow in for this one. And a little bit of shadow along here. Okay, so let's start off with our werewolf up here, our main werewolf. And we're going to add an exposure. So let's add the exposure, clip it to our werewolf here, and let's just darken him down a little bit. About there, looks pretty good. Okay, we're going to do the little rim light around the werewolf, the color coming from the back of the moon there. So again, we're going to come up here to select and select from layer. Again, we're going to come up here to select and pick grow and shrink. Again, it's going to be -1. So let's apply that and let's come up here to select feather and 5 and apply. We're going to invert the selection right on top, new pixel layer. Let's pick the color in the back of the ground there of the moon and activate it. And again, we're going to hit our flood fill selection tool, flood that color, clip it to our werewolf, and then click on Command D. We've got a nice rim light all the way around, but we don't want it in some places. So let's, on that color, the color of the moon on that pixel layer, let's add a mask. Let's get our colors back to default. We want black. Got our paintbrush tool. We still know we've got a soft brush. And we can bring the flow up to 100%, it doesn't matter. So we're going to get rid of anywhere that rim light shouldn't be. So because of the rocks would be hiding his feet here. And we're going to bring those ears back in there as well. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to drop my flow now to about 25%, I think. And then I'm just going to soften the rest of this. So just soften up that rim light a little bit. Bring some of that back again. Now that looks pretty good. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add another exposure down here. So exposure. And clip that to our werewolf as well. And this one I'm going to make quite bright. And I'm going to invert it with a Command I. Still on my brush, still about 25% for the flow, painting in white. Just going to add a little bit more sort of rim light to those areas here. And just lighten up his face a little bit. Okay, I'm happy with that. So that's that werewolf done. So what we're going to do is add another pixel layer on top. Going to change the blend mode to color burn. Clicking on my colors here, I'm going to pick a nice red color. And my brush flow maybe a little bit more, maybe 40. Make my brush really small. Actually, I'm going to take my flow up to 100. Make it big, bring this down. Color burn or color dodge. Let's do color dodge and just get those eyes nice and bright. Command 0, yep, that looks pretty good. Let's add another pixel layer on top. Let's change the blend mode on this one to overlay, and this one, the flow will come down to about 25% for this one. And make my brush a little bit bigger, and then I'm just going to brush some red into the mouth there. And I'm going to add it onto some of these fingernails or claws. Also making my brush a little bit bigger. Just going to add where these highlights on the hand are some red as well, because they have been on a hunt, these werewolves, so they've got a bit of blood on them. Maybe a little bit on the chest here, and some on the knees as well. Okay, I'm going to bring that opacity down to 50%, just like that. Command 0, And let's clip both of these layers just to that werewolf. So there's our first werewolf finished. We can also just bring the darker exposure down a little bit darker. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to do exactly the same to both of these werewolves now. So I won't go through it again, but I'll just go and do these two werewolves now and come back in a short while. Okay, so now we've got all our werewolves done the same way as our center one. We can now just come over here. Let's bring the trees up a little bit. So clicking on our tree or forest, grabbing our move tool, let's just make them a little bit taller. In the background there, that looks pretty good. Okay, one more thing that I'm going to do right on top here. Come over here to my rectangular marquee tool. On the fill here, I'm going to pick fill, grab my color picker and pick one of these sort of nice blue colors and activate that color and draw a rectangle with that color all the way over the top. Changing my blend mode to average, and I'm going to bring that down to 25% on the opacity. And then I'm going to click on the top one here all the way down to the bottom, holding shift key and click on. So I've got all those layers highlighted. Come up here to layer, merge visible. And then on this layer, I'm going to come over here to my camera or develop persona here. Clicking on basic, I'm going to bring the contrast up and I'm going to drop the exposure a little bit. Down here on my white balance, I'm going to bring that into the blue a little bit more. And then over here on the details tab, clicking on detail, bring that up to about 25, the radius and the amount as well, probably about 25 as well. We'll keep it consistent. Over here on the noise addition, I'm just going to add about 5% noise. And I'm going to click on develop. So there we go, everybody. That is my tutorial for this week on the werewolf picture. I hope you have enjoyed the tutorial. As usual, all the pictures that I've used will be linked below. If you have enjoyed the tutorial, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And if you would like to show your appreciation for my channel, you can head over to the Buy Me a Coffee site. The links will be below for that as well. But until next time, I'll say to you, stay well, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.